Hello, my name is Dr. Brian Raid, and I'm a naturopathic doctor, and this is a video about the cost and logistics of ordering tests for Lyme and co-infections. Someone asked a question about this on one of my previous videos, and I'm happy to talk about that. Because cost is it's a bit of a it's a bit of a mystery factor sometimes, because when you go to the websites of the various labs that do testing for Lyme and co-infections, and by Lyme I mean referring to what people would call chronic Lyme or persistent borreliosis, they don't always post their price lists. Now some labs do. IGeneX, which is a very common lab that's used, and I have no financial affiliation with any lab, so I'm just speaking from my experience and just sharing knowledge. My recollection, because I was on their website not that long ago, is they have a price list posted on there, so you can access that and see what they're charging for their labs. Other labs, like say Armin Labs from Germany, or DNA Connections, or looking at some of the other labs that might run these types of panels. Those are the three that we use, so I'll speak to those three. They don't necessarily post their prices online. I don't believe that they do, and that's their prerogative, I suppose. But the question was about, do different labs offer panels for multiple infectious microbes? And the answer is yes, they do. Some of them, like say IGeneX, they have a myriad of different panels. They have panels based on the region where you're living. They have panels for pretty much anybody's what anybody might be looking for, essentially. So lots of different panels. Other labs, like Armin Labs, they don't. They have a certain panel that has lots and lots of their tests all included in one, but it's pretty much just all a la carte. At the end of the day, I don't know that. And then DNA Connections, we haven't ordered from them in a long time, but when we did, once upon a time, it was just a one-size-fits-all. They just do one test. And it's a very test for lots of different microbes. It's quite a comprehensive panel, but there's no option unless something has changed, where you're able to order less than one test. So, or only test for one microbe, or just a couple. So I think the advantage of a panel is that if a person just, like if a clinician or a patient just doesn't know what the heck to test for, then a panel can be good because it's just casting a broad net. Or if you say, well, I live in this region, I guess I'll do the northwestern US panel, or the southeastern panel, or whatever it happens to be. But I don't think that there's a huge advantage, in my opinion, to having panels, like at least from my perception as a clinician, because I know what microbes I want to test for, so I don't really need a panel. Now, it is nice sometimes that the panels are generally less expensive than doing everything a la carte. With a lab like Armin Labs, where they don't have many panels per se, I don't think it really affects the price tag anyways, in terms of whether you're just ordering a la carte or if they were to do a panel. So there are panels that are available. And then in terms of the cost of the testing, so as I mentioned with IGeneX, their prices are posted online. We honestly, I have nothing against IGeneX at all. I find that the Armin Lab testing to be more useful for my practice, like based on the way my brain works, my understanding of how it all goes. So again, nothing against IGeneX at all. I think they're a fine lab, but we just don't really use them much. So I'm not super familiar with their prices. In terms of some of the pricing or tests that we have run there recently, because there are sometimes patients request that we use IGeneX, and that's fine. Happy to do that. Sometimes they want to test through multiple labs, and if they are inclined to do that and they have the money for it, all the power to them. We're happy to facilitate that if that's what they want. But my recollection is that I believe to do an ELISpot test, so an enzyme-linked immunospot test, which in my opinion is one of the most useful tests, if not the most useful test to run when it comes to looking for these types of microbes, is I believe they charge about $295 US. That's in contrast to Armin Labs, which, so with I always quote it to patients with the exchange rate into Canadian dollars, because I'm in beautiful Canada. But ballpark, I believe it's about 150 to 180 euros, I believe. So it's probably around like $200 US, maybe $220 US to do the same test. Now, IGeneX does offer a combined ELISpot test for Bartonella and Borrelia. To my knowledge, those are the only two ELISpot tests that they offer. Armin Labs has a ton of different ones, basically any microbe you might want in the Lyme co-infection world, including and viruses as well. They offer them, but I believe it's cheaper to do the combined test. I think it might be more like $400 US to do the Bartonella and the Borrelia early spot together. But again, you can just access that on the website. For doing serological testing, like Western blot testing, looking for Lyme or Borrelia or different co-infections, ballpark, you're looking at around like maybe $200-ish US to do testing for that. And then they do PCR testing as well for the blood. It's a great test, but it just has, to my knowledge, such a low sensitivity. You get false negatives on PCR testing, just in my opinion, far too easily. So I don't really recommend doing that testing. But they have all their prices on there. With Armin Labs, the general rule that I say to my patients is that you're basically looking at, again, this is Canadian dollar, so I'll try to do a US conversion here on the fly. So it's about $100 Canadian, or about, say, $75 US, based on present day exchange rates, give or take, for the shipping costs. You're in about that much money just out of the gate just to ship the samples over there. Then to test for Borrelia, as I mentioned, it's about $300 Canadian, so let's say maybe $225-ish US. Then for any co-infection, as a rule, it's about $100 Canadian, or I guess about $75 US to test for any given co-infection. This is all for ELI spot testing. And then for viruses, it's about the same as well, although for Epstein-Barr virus, it's a more elaborate panel, so that one's more like 150 Canadian, or maybe 110 or something like that US. So that's roughly what you're looking at. And then, of course, there's probably going to be a blood draw fee for whoever's drawing the blood, but that's basically kind of the pricing if you're paying the lab directly. Some clinics do mediate the sale or purchase of that testing through themselves, and so there might be a markup fee there. So I don't know, we don't do that, but that might be applicable in some places. And so that's what you're. And then for DNA Connections, who do urine PCR testing, for their comprehensive panel, and I loved the panel, like lots and lots of microbes that they test for, multiple species of Borrelia, multiple species of Bartonella, multiple species of Babesia, as well as Ehrlichia and Anaplasma. So it's a wonderful panel, and I think it's very good and useful testing. I do think we got some false negatives on some patients, but I think that it's overall useful testing. The price of that, I think it used to be, oh my goodness, we haven't ordered it in a while because the pricing went up quite a bit. I think it was around 400-ish, maybe 350 US, and then I think that went up to 500 or 600 US, give or take. So with the Canadian exchange rate, it used to be around 550, I think, and then I think of Canadian, and then it went up to around closer to like 800 or 900. So we just stopped using it because it was just, Armin Labs is just more cost effective for my patients, and I think they're both good, useful tests, but ultimately I am happier as a clinician with the testing that we get through Armin Labs. It is really important to note, and I mentioned this in my last video, that unfortunately I didn't manage to post on Instagram because I deleted it before I uploaded it. I'm sleep deprived apparently, but it is posted on my Facebook page on East Coast Naturopathic Clinic, in case you're watching this on Instagram and want to cross-reference that. But as I mentioned in the other video, there's a really significant lack of research evidence validating a lot of these tests. Not to say that none of them have been subject to any validation studies, but it's a real lack. And so with these tests, when I'm talking about the testing being useful in my practice or which ones I find to be the best, it's some of it's inspired by what's in the scientific literature. A lot of it's based on what I've seen in clinical practice, what my mentors have seen, what my colleagues have seen, kind of this pooled experiential data. So testing, I think it's useful, but it's not 100% definitive. And I have personally significant reservations about patients spending exorbitant amounts of money on really comprehensive testing panels, unless they're making an informed decision knowing that there are limitations to that testing. And even though testing does have its limitations, there is always the possibility of doing a therapeutic trial to investigate whether someone might be suffering from some type of an infection. So I think just, I guess, a take-home message, I talked about this for many, many more minutes, hours probably. The take-home message is that testing can be useful. It is quite expensive, especially if you're casting a broad net. Doing a broad net testing and dropping a lot of money, it's not a mandatory thing. Lots of patients where we don't do any testing or we just do some testing, there's a lot of ways to feel this stuff out clinically. So I just wouldn't want anyone to finish listening to this video thinking, well, geez, unless I can spend a small fortune on testing, like I just this isn't going to be accessible to me unless I can access a whole bunch of money to do that. So there are some There are some inexpensive alternate options. I have posted on that before as well. If you search back in old video archives here, I do have some videos about that as well. But if there's any questions or comments about this, please let me know. This is over a 10-minute video. Oh my goodness. Talked your ear off long enough. I hope this is helpful, and I'll leave it there.